okay, when you are creating a filter. Let's go back. So let's try and do caller is so this is a slightly different way of accessing that user table, but you should be able to put a caller in here to build out a filter. I'm not sure whether that's the have two users with the same name. How can I be sure? Ah, right. Haha. Remember, these records do have unique sys IDs. Okay, so if they have exactly the same name, you would have to change the unique ID that you are using. So what you can do is change the display field to email. So on a table, you can set which is the field that is the display name. Okay, but you would see two people there. In your use case where they got exactly the same name, obviously you wouldn't know who was who. Okay, you would have to have some other unique identifier, but the records themselves would be uniquely identified, even though that username might be the same. But I think good practice would be to definitely try to have some distinguishing letter in there somewhere if people had exactly the same first name and last name. Maybe you'd want to go for middle name as well. Can we use caller contains? Yep, can do that. So just use the contains here. If you want to do it on the list, hopefully you can see this, guys. If you're doing it on the list, you can do a contains with your wildcard. So if I look for Beth, should restrict that list to that string within the username. Okay, we had a question regarding filters on related lists. Okay, so let's have a quick look at that. And this is kind of leading into another module we're going to look at this afternoon, which is the whole table structure and the data model. But since it has come up now, let's have a look at related list conditions. Okay, so you don't get this in list version 2. That's why I would recommend that you guys go for list version 3, if you can. And just remember that we have a relational database. Okay, so just to give you my example here, I'm going to use incidents. Okay, so if we look on the incident form, just have a look. We can actually scroll down and see related lists. Okay, so out of box, you get a related list of task SLAs. Okay, so service level agreements that are attached to this incident. That's just one example. Okay, now you need a related list where you have a one-to-many or a many-to-many relationship in the database. So you can imagine one incident could trigger many service level agreements depending on the conditions that you set, right? So we'd have to have a list here. I've also added a related list of child incidents. Okay, if you right click and configure related lists, you can add any of the related lists from your table structure. Okay, so think of related lists as a way of showing on the form one-to-many relationships. Okay, now the reason I put incident arrow parent related list is because this signifies all the other incidents where this particular incident is the parent. Okay, this allows us to have that concept of child incidents. Okay, so if I scroll down on this one, it has no child incidents. But if someone called in and then we had incidents with the same issue that was happening, maybe you want to create them as child incidents, right? That would be a related list. Okay, so we see related lists all over the system. So what I did just while you guys were having lunch or finishing off your labs, I just created a couple of incidents here to show you that relationship. So I've got a parent incident here. It's called it parent incident in short description, or ease. And what I did was I created another incident and made it a child. So notice in this incidents related list, this incident here is the child incident. The one I'm looking at now is the parent. Okay? So we have a related list. At the moment, it's just got one record in there. So imagine somebody wanted to filter and find only those incidents out of all of these open incidents, only those ones that had at least one child incident. Okay, so that's where this filter related lists comes into play. Okay, so I'm going to stick to active is true, expand here on related list conditions, and basically I can first decide which related list am I talking about. Okay, so this is going to be incident parent. Okay, that one that I just added to show child incidents. I could only look at active child incidents if I wanted to as well, so I can specify conditions against the related list as well. And notice the choice here of quantity: greater than or equal to, less than, equal to, none, and between. Okay, so if I put greater than or equal to 1, and then I run this, let's see what happens. And it's just returned that single record, because at the moment in my incident table there's only that one record. And click on that, that's the one I just showed you. So it's got at least one active incident in that child incidents related list. So if you look on your incident form, you will just see task SLAs. Okay, so you're already seeing how we can customize these forms. Okay, so if you want to have a practice, just right mouse click on your form, configure the related lists. Any that you add in the slush bucket here will appear at the base of your form, and that is true for any forms in the system. The reason we don't put them all on baseline is because these forms get very, very busy, and it's up to you guys how much information in terms of related lists, fields, etc. that you want to see on the form. So hopefully, guys, that was a quick demo of just seeing who asked the questions. Excuse me, guys. Just going back up. I think it was Marcin. So hopefully, Marcin, that explains what we mean by that feature. But it is quite a cool feature, which list version 3 brings to the table. Okay, so any other questions come up whilst doing the lab or whilst you are mulling over things at lunchtime? Please do fire away. What I'm going to do is bring up my slide deck for the next section. And let's go ahead and have a look at Module 2, User Administration. Okay, so important task for sysadmin is to maintain the users, their groups, and their roles on the system. So that's what we're going to have a look at. It's a fairly brief module, but very important nevertheless. Okay. Okay, I'm just sorting out my WebEx windows. Right, so let's talk about user and user authentication to begin with. So just like everything else in ServiceNow, we have a table that stores our user records. Okay, it is called sys_user. Every table has this system name and then friendly name, the label, in this case is user. And user can view a subset of their own user record in that self-service My Profile module. Let's just have a quick look at these two things. So seeing as I'm sysadmin, I have access to users table. Just typing users, scrolling down, there we have the module. I'm just going to favorite that. Here's all my 577 user records on this instance. While I'm here, I'm just going to bookmark or favorite my groups module as well, because we're going to talk about user groups. And then let's just have a look under self-service at an example of the profile. So under my profile, in the baseline self-service view, these are the fields that your users can see on their own user profile. This is where they can set their own time zone and anything else for that matter, including their email, that you want them to be able to see. So again, you can manipulate this. Some companies don't even allow people to see their profile. Okay, it's totally up to you how much or how little they see. Remember, user record itself, you have full visibility here as sysadmin. So all the fields that you need are visible and any related lists. So we'll come back to that. I'm going to create a couple of examples of users for Cloud Dimensions. So you guys will also be doing that. But in terms of authentication, okay, you all logged in this morning with your credentials as admin. We're all using the user called admin, and their password was set by me. We're all using that same password. Okay, so as we logged in, we were just doing local database authentication. Okay, so that's that top one on the list here. So what you can do is just have standalone login, as we did this morning, navigate to the ServiceNow instance URL, give people a username and password, and let them log in. Okay, that would be your most simple way to authenticate users on the system. However, there are lots of other approaches, and most people and a lot of companies these days, they want to look at using integrations with Active Directory. So we have LDAP will take care of our login, and a lot of times we will use single sign-on as well. So basically, ServiceNow is fully compatible with any system of single sign-on. Okay, you can have multi-factor authentication. We use this ourselves with Google Authenticator. And for our single sign-on, we use something called Okta. Okay, that's what we actually use for our instances that we use in production. And we have an integration with our LDAP server. Okay, so we only have to remember one password. That is our Active Directory password, which I'm sure probably most of you guys will go for some flavor of those things that I've mentioned. So in terms of setting up LDAP, multi-factor, and these three different types of single sign-on, so SAML, OAuth, and digest token, this should all be done by your implementation team. Okay, so obviously all of you out there who are currently working on instances, that's probably already been set up. Those of you who are going to go live shortly, that will be being set up at the moment by whoever's doing your implementation. It is not a task for sysadmin to set up. Sysadmin needs to come in once you have your users set up and then create groups and assign roles from that moment going forward. Having said that, if you want a deeper dive into things like LDAP, single sign-on, everything is available on the documentation. Okay. We do have a course called Implementation Bootcamp. You might have heard of it. That's where we go into more depth of setting up these LDAP integrations. Okay. So just a slide there on LDAP. It's the lightweight directory access protocol. Most of the time, we're talking about integrating with the customer's Active Directory. Okay, so what will happen there is we essentially delegate the user authentication to LDAP over a read-only HTTPS connection. Okay, so we have a secure connection. Basically, the table does not store your Active Directory password. Okay, it will just simply redirect back when we log in to the Active Directory. So provided the person supplies the correct username and password for AD, ServiceNow will kind of defer to that and allow you to log in. Okay, and it's a bit like just a black box as far as ServiceNow is concerned. And that integration with LDAP is refreshed at least on a daily basis. If you want that to be more frequent, again, you can discuss that with your implementation partners. You can refresh that as often as you like. It's just a scheduled import of user records. So if you create a new user halfway through the day, well, obviously it will not be available for ServiceNow until the next refresh, maybe that night. Okay, so if you want it more frequent, you can make that possible via your scheduled jobs. Okay, so we populate the database by filling in the user table with users from AD, and then moving forward, anyone logging in will be authenticated by that method. So this is the most common way that people will allow users onto ServiceNow instance. Okay, single sign-on becoming very commonly used, allowing someone just to sign in into a single interface and then accessing various systems, including their ServiceNow instance. Okay, so assuming we have users in the user table, we want to start thinking about setting up groups. Okay, so you can actually map your user group structure from your Active Directory. That will just use those operational units in your LDAP directory and create groups accordingly in the groups table within ServiceNow. That's totally up to you and your implementation. However, if you don't want to do that, you can set up groups directly in ServiceNow and then place users into those groups. So just some examples there. These tend to be functional groups. So what I mean by that, in ServiceNow, you tend to belong to groups that allow you to carry out some particular set of processes, whether it be ITSM related, HR related, it could be training group, etc. Okay, so you can actually create users from the group record. I'll show you how we do that. You can actually do it the other way around as well, because we just have a relationship there of many to many. So one user can belong in many groups. One group obviously can contain many users. Let's move on to roles. Roles are extremely important in ServiceNow. This is how we give access to applications, modules, and the underlying data in the tables on the instance. Okay, So when you give roles to people, you are giving them permissions, a whole set of permissions that come along with that role. And these are just stored in a table called sysuserRole, and we give the role usually at group level. Okay, this is considered best practice, and you will just inherit all the roles from all the groups that you belong to. This is a lot easier to administer. Okay, rather than giving roles to individual users, we give them to groups. As soon as we put someone in that group, there is a little script, a business rule will execute and give them the roles that belong on that group record. Okay, and you'll see this in action in your next lab. I'll give you a quick demo in a moment. Okay. So when we create applications in ServiceNow, we create some associated roles that go along with them. And you'll see out of the box you have quite a few provided roles. I'll show you them in a moment. But some of the main ones here that you should be aware of are listed out. The top of the pile over on the left is System Administrator. And this essentially gives you access to all areas with all permissions. Okay, so they are essentially king or queen of the instance. Then we have some specialist admins. So you could be delegated to administer HR. Maybe you'd be delegated to administer project management. So we have admin roles within those applications. Okay, so we call those specialized administrators. Then our fulfiller roles. The ITIL role allows us to do the jobs that typically come along with all our ITSM processes. So anyone who is involved in change management, incident management, or problem management, and they're working the service desk, etc., we would need to give them ITIL role. That's going to give them all the access that they need to do their jobs. Then you've got people who are approvers. Okay, so typically when we're looking at service catalog tomorrow, create items on there. If I want to order a new laptop, for example, usually my manager will have to approve that. In order to approve, my manager is going to need the approval role to actually access the correct module where they can see their approval records and just approve or reject those approvals. Just moving my windows around a bit. And then finally we have what we call the employee self-service, which is actually no role at all. Okay, so some users on the system just have a login. They don't have any roles, but they will still be able to access their self-service modules so that they can, for instance, order things on Service Catalog, access any public pages that you allow them to see. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of some of the main roles. And if you want to see all of the roles on your instance, I'll just jump in here. Just type roles. And under User Administration, there is the roles module, which is a list of all records in the roles table. Okay, so you can see I've got 161 records here, so 161 roles. Let's have a look at ITIL, just as an example. So the ITIL role is just defined here as a string. We've got a description there, and then some related lists. And this is an important one. Contains 5 other roles. So we have the ability to nest roles within other roles. So if you give the ITIL role, you're also giving these 5 other roles. Okay? And as an admin, sometimes you want to add to some of these roles so that you can just give extra permissions to groups that already possess the role, in this case, ITIL. If you want to give them extra permissions, you could just edit this list, look for the role that you want to give to all your ITIL people in the slush bucket, just move that in, and that will just give everybody who's currently got ITIL those extra roles. Applications with this role, in other words, those that require this role, I've got 15 listed, and then I've got 14 modules that require this role. So think of the roles as a set of keys to the kingdom of ServiceNow. Okay, so if I was to log in, for example, I'm going to impersonate. Remember, I think you guys have done this. We can impersonate other users. I've got somebody in here, I think Joe Employee, has no roles, but notice they can still see applications, especially self-service. Okay, but they can see a lot less than somebody who has, for example, ITIL role. I just use my ITIL user. This is someone called ITIL user who has the ITIL role. Notice they can see a lot more applications, including incident, problem, and change, amongst others. Okay? Excuse me, guys. I just had somebody switching on a loud piece of machinery outside. I'll close my windows. Okay, so if you want to quickly see who has what roles within your instance, it's a really useful module. You must log back in as sysadmin. So as admin, if I wanted a quick audit of who had what roles, I do have a module for that called User Roles, and you can see with this version 3, I get this nice ability to select any role on the left-hand side. So let me just deselect them all. Let's say I want to see who has ITIL. This is in alphabetical order. Got 23 people there. I can see this grouping of all the people that currently have ITIL role within this instance. Okay. Just jump back to the deck. Any questions so far, guys? Just fire away, as always. Keep my eye on the chat. Role hierarchy, kind of discussed this. Just a nice diagrammatic representation here. This role at the top, called Personalize, contains this role called Personalized Rules, which itself contains 2 other roles. So if you were to give somebody this top role, obviously they would inherit all these other 3 roles. Okay, so that's a little bit of a caveat in the sense that always check if a role that you're giving does contain other roles. Make sure you're happy to give those permissions. Okay, for information on permissions that roles actually give, if you look at any application on the documentation, it will tell you which roles come with that application. So if you were to install, for example, project management, you'd see on the docs that that brought with it quite a lot of roles for the different stakeholders in that process. Okay, so it's not common that you would have to create new roles, but what we're going to do in our lab this afternoon, a little bit later, is we're going to create a brand new application, show you how easy it is to customize this platform. And when we do that, we will be creating new roles, okay? And that can be done automatically or manually. It's up to you. Someone's raised their hand. That's pretty cool. Is there a way to check the effective permissions on a user? Jacko, if you could elaborate a little bit more in terms of how you might imagine we would do that. Basically, the easiest way to check someone's permissions, if I understand you correctly, would just go to their user record. Let's have a look at this guy, Able Tutor. Yeah, we would see related list of roles on the user record. Okay, so this guy, Able, has no roles. So that would be the place where you'd go and check. If you wanted to actually see what effect that had to his view of the system, that's where impersonation would be useful. Okay, so if you just wanted to see what roles they had, just look in this user record. Jacko, just let me know if I understood your question correctly. To get 6 different permissions via different rules, yeah, they would all appear here. Okay, this is the beauty of this related list. Okay, so what you'll notice, I could give roles to Able Tutor directly, but best practice would dictate I would give it to any groups that he belonged to. We would still be able to audit that via his user record. And remember, we have reporting, guys. So I could generate a report that just gave me all the roles possessed by any user that I want. So we'll look at reporting tomorrow. So Jacko, hopefully that will, you could have an experiment to. I see this little bug. Which little bug are you referring to? Ah, right. There's a little bug somewhere. Yeah, that is a debug. Not sure where it appeared. Yes, this one. This is allowing me to debug list version 3 compatibility. And you might see this little bug. And notice list version 3 is not a label for related lists. Says there. If I wanted to see all the functionality of this version 3 on a related list, I need to change a system property. Okay. Back to roles. One interesting point and a tech note here. Some of these slides, we do say these are tech notes. So worth noting down or bookmarking this. When we are dealing with system security, guys, I'm going to talk about this on Wednesday. The admin actually has to elevate their role to security admin. Okay, the reason for this is you're going to modify something called access controls. You can have quite, how can I put this, quite a profound effect on who sees what in the system. So basically what that means is, in practice, I'll just show you, if I was going to start changing access controls, and we're going to look at this on Wednesday, I'll just give you a quick preview. Under system security, we have a table full of what we call access controls. Okay, this is what determines permissions on tables and fields. Okay, if I was to open one of these up, just at random, notice it's read only. Okay, that's because in order to edit these, I need to elevate from just admin to security admin, just by going to the user menu, elevating roles, ticking this box, press OK. I will then be able to edit these. And the reason we do that is as a double check, because as you can imagine, changing some of these access control rules, if you don't know what you're doing, you could be causing access to tables and records that you don't want to give. Okay, and there's going to be more on that, a whole module or section on Wednesday. Okay, but just since it was mentioned here, that's what it refers to. Okay. So this is what we consider best practice, guys. Assign users to groups and then assign the roles to the group. So these users are here, at the moment don't belong in the help desk group. They would not possess these roles. If I was to take that user there, put her into that group, she would just be given these 3 roles. Okay. Equally, if I take one of these people out, they will lose these roles. Okay. But as pointed out by Jacko, maybe they get that role anyway from another group. Okay. So just remember, you can belong in many groups. Those groups could give you the same permission twice. Okay. It's not going to give you any extra permission. It just means that you are given that role again, and you'll still be able to access whatever it is that role allows you to access. So again, as an admin, if you want to revoke somebody's access, just make sure they don't have that same access via membership of multiple groups. So let's just have a quick look by way of a demo. I want to create a couple of users and a groups for my cloud dimensions. So let me go ahead and create a user. And then what I'm going to show you, as soon as we have groups, we can actually start to automate some task assignment. Okay, so for instance, we can assign incidents to one of our cloud dimension groups based on some conditions on those new incident records. So we'll already be looking at automation at a very basic level. So firstly, I'm going to go to my users table, create a new record, and what I want to do here is create a record for myself. Let's say I have just been given the job of sysadmin on this instance. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to create myself as a user. So user ID, we're using this convention of first name dot last name. Just for example, I'm not going to fill in all these fields. Just going to save that record so you can see the related lists. And as mentioned on the slide, I now have roles, groups. I've got some other things here, but the point is I can create a new group from a user record. Okay, so whilst I could make myself admin by giving myself admin role, even if at the moment I only want one person in this group, makes sense to create a group. So I'm going to call this Z Cloud Admin. Okay, and I'm just using Z so I can search for it easy later on. Okay, so this now is a group record. Again, I'm going to fill in all the other fields so you guys get the idea. I am now a member of that group since I created the group from my own user record. Okay, so what I can do now is go to the group record, okay, just by clicking on there. So just be aware when you're doing this, you'll always see the record name in the top. Make sure you are on the record that you intend to be. In this case, group record for Z Cloud Admin is where I want to give admin role. So just click edit there in the roles related lists, search for admin role. So I can give any roles here, but this role essentially inherits all the other roles. Okay. In other words, it's going to give me access to everything on the system. Notice I get a message here. This was my business rule executed saying admin has been given to Stephen.Quayle user. Okay. Now you also have the ability to have child groups. Notice zCloud Admin has a related list of other groups. So let me just show you what would happen if I create a new group. Let's call this zCloud Marketing. And to submit that, notice it inherited the role from the parent. Okay, so this is expected behavior because I want to save myself admin. If I want these roles to cascade, anyone in cloud marketing now will also become an admin. Okay, so just let me put one user into this group. So Z Cloud Marketing, well, I'll create a new person called ZMark Marketing. Okay, this is a company where people have names the same as their jobs. If only real life was so simple. So ZMark Marketing, submit that, let's see what happens. He's getting the admin role. Okay, so you're probably shouting at the screen saying, let me just get rid of that message, probably saying, Steve, don't give marketing people admin rights. Okay, obviously I wouldn't really do that in real life, so you can hopefully forgive me, just showing you how that role was inherited by the child group and therefore by anyone who is a member of that child group. Okay, so if I just go to show you some assignment now, so I've got an admin, myself, I've got this guy ZMark Marketing, and notice on his user record you can see he has admin role, so any other roles would appear here as well. Okay, and I mentioned assignment. Okay, we have something called assignment rules in the system policy application. Okay, let's take a quick look, and then I'll let you guys do the lab. You're going to have a go at this yourself. We've got a few assignment roles already in here. These are essentially conditions against a table, and which allow us to filter out records and assign them to individuals. Okay, so what we have in ServiceNow is tasks. So an incident record is essentially a task that we can assign. So is a problem record, and so is change request. So task, as you'll see in our next module, is kind of the base table, contains all the fields that we need to assign groups and individuals work. Okay, so what I'm going to do is assign some incident tasks automatically. I'm going to call this Z demo. This is for my real world example of cloud dimensions, where we want to set up some demos of our handheld holographic devices. So what I'm going to do is say all records on the incident table. So these are all my task tables. I'm going to choose incident. All records that match this condition. Okay, so I'm going to say short description contains this word demo. Okay, this is just an example, guys. You could use any criteria you want. Any record contains that. I can now assign it to a user or a group. Again, best practice, assign it at group level. Z Cloud Marketing is the one I've just created. And as simple as that, guys, if that rule is active, I'll just show you the active field is set to true. There we go. Just a Boolean field. So this rule is active on the system. If I was to create a new incident that satisfies that, so let's just put Beth as the caller, and then please set up a demo in Amsterdam. Okay, let's have a look at the assignment group. At the moment it is empty. If I right click and save the record, it has assigned that to Z Cloud Marketing as a result of my assignment rule. What happens next, typically in tasks, is that people will pick up those tasks in queues, such as these ones here in Service Desk, My Groups Work. Okay, so if I was a member of Z Cloud Marketing, I would see it listed here. I could then pull that off and assign it to myself. It would then go into the My Work queue. Okay, so these are just filtered lists against any task tables and form the basis of the queues where people will grab their work and start working on that. Okay, so you can already see how simple it would be to set up some initial routing of incidents, problems, changes, service catalog requests, etc. They would all appear in these My Groups Work, and then My Work would be if the Assigned To field contains my name. You can see that filter for that module just is the logged in user. I'm going to pick that up and use that in the filter. Okay, so any questions, folks? Hopefully you guys are all okay, still listening intently. I'm assuming no news is good news in terms of questions. I will let you guys go ahead and do this next lab, which should take you again about 20 minutes. If you clear your hands up, then if I